Our honeymoon was meant to be the start of a blissful journey together, but things took a dark turn when my husband vanished without a trace. He wasn't in our hotel room, and his belongings were left behind. My heart pounded as I learned he had taken the car and driven off, leaving me with more questions than answers. 19 hours later, the police found his car, but what they discovered inside was beyond my worst fears. My husband had been behaving strangely in the days leading up to our honeymoon. I noticed he was often preoccupied, with a distant look in his eyes, and his cheerful demeanor seemed forced. His usual jokes and laughter were replaced by distracted silence. It was as if he was mentally miles away. Despite my concerns, I pushed the thoughts aside, thinking it was just pre-wedding stress getting the better of him. He would take long phone calls and often seemed lost in thought. Each time his phone rang, he would step out of the room or into another part of the house. Who could he be talking to? I wondered. Whenever I asked, he brushed it off with a casual, "Just work stuff." But his tone was unconvincing, and I couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling. Something was definitely off. During our honeymoon, he received an urgent call and left the room abruptly, reassuring me he'd be back soon. His phone buzzed incessantly, and he glanced at it with a troubled expression. "I'll be right back," he said, leaving the room hurriedly. I was confused but didn't press for details, assuming it was important. Minutes turned into hours, and my worry deepened as he didn't return. Hours passed, and panic started to set in. I paced the room, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if he got into an accident? What if he was hurt? Checking my watch every few minutes, I tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. The unease gnawed at me, and I felt a pit growing in my stomach. Something was seriously wrong, and I had no idea what to do. I contacted the hotel staff, but they had no information. "Have you seen my husband?" I asked the concierge with a shaky voice. They hadn't noticed anything unusual. A search around the hotel grounds proved fruitless, adding to my anxiety. The staff suggested waiting a bit longer, as he might return soon, but I felt an undeniable urge to take further action. My instinct screamed that this was more than just a delay. The police traced his car through GPS, discovering it was parked on a deserted road. They informed me that his car had been located in an isolated area far from our hotel. My heart sank further as my imagination conjured up all sorts of dreadful possibilities. The police assured me they would send officers to check the vicinity and look for any signs of him or what might have happened. Officers combed the area looking for any signs of him or clues about his disappearance. Flashlights scanned the dark, deserted road and surrounding woods. They searched for anything out of place, footprints, discarded items, anything that could provide a hint. I stayed by the phone, waiting for news, every minute stretching into an eternity. The emptiness of the deserted place only added to the mystery, amplifying my growing dread. Meanwhile, I stayed back at the hotel, sick with worry. The silence in the room was unbearable. I sat by the window hoping to see him walk in any second. My eyes stayed glued to the phone, awaiting any update from the police. Each time it buzzed, my heart leaped with hope, only to be disappointed. The uncertainty was the worst part, every second stretching my nerves tighter and tighter. To mitigate my anxiety, I began to piece together the events leading up to his disappearance. I recalled every conversation, every look, every odd behavior. Why did he take those long calls? What was he so preoccupied with? I grabbed my notebook and started writing down everything I could remember, hoping to find a pattern. Every little detail seemed crucial now, as I desperately tried to understand what had happened to my husband. Every little detail seemed crucial now, as I desperately tried to understand what had happened to my husband. I combed through our conversations, attempting to recall any hint or clue I might have missed. His recent behavior, the long phone calls, everything felt like it held a piece of the puzzle. I even started jotting down key points in a notepad, hoping to spot a connection that could lead me to him. A call from the police later informed me they found his car, My heart pounded as I answered the phone, half expecting some terrible news. "Ma'am," the officer said, "we've located your husband's vehicle." It was parked miles away from our hotel on an isolated road. I sighed in relief that they had at least found something concrete, but the questions in my mind only multiplied. Where was he? At the police station, I was asked to identify some of his belongings found in the vehicle. Standing there, I scanned through the items laid out on a table. It felt surreal, almost like an out-of-body experience. I noticed his wallet, phone, and wedding ring. "These are his," I confirmed. The officers took notes and exchanged puzzled glances, which only added to my anxiety. What did their expressions mean? My husband's wallet, phone, and wedding ring were there, but he was not. Seeing these items felt like a punch to the gut. They were things he'd never leave behind. Essential, personal. Yet, his absence was glaringly obvious. My thoughts raced as I tried to comprehend why he'd abandoned such important belongings. The police looked equally baffled, sharing an unspoken concern. Where on earth could he be? The officers seemed puzzled. There were no signs of struggle. "It's like he just vanished," one of them muttered under his breath. The car looked untouched, no broken windows or signs of force. Everything was in place except for my husband. The absence of any conflict or struggle only deepened the mystery. If he hadn't been taken against his will, then why were his essential items left behind? I couldn't help but wonder why he'd leave such personal items behind. His phone, his wallet, they were things he kept on him at all times. The wedding ring, too, held sentimental value. The questions circled in my mind like a storm. Was he trying to send a message, or was he forced to leave them behind? The lack of answers gnawed at me, making the situation even more perplexing. Another immediate search ensued, but it yielded no results. The police extended their search area, scouring nearby locations and questioning anyone who might have seen him. I stayed back at the station, every minute feeling like an eternity. "We've looked everywhere, one officer said, sounding defeated. The more they searched without finding anything, the more unbearable the silence grew. My worry transformed into a sinking feeling of dread. The only option was to follow any leads his phone might provide. "Let's check his call history and messages," an officer suggested. They plugged his phone into their system, scanning for any suspicious activity. I watched anxiously, hoping this would finally give us some answers. Every beep and click of their equipment felt like a step closer to finding out what had really happened, making my heart race. Data from his phone revealed nothing unusual except one outgoing call made moments before he disappeared. The call stood out. It was made only minutes before he left the room abruptly. My pulse quickened at the discovery. "Who did he call?" I asked, my voice shaky. The police assured me they would trace the number and find out. This tiny piece of information felt like a thread we could pull on. The call was to a number I didn't recognize. "Do you know this number?" the officer asked, showing me the screen. I shook my head, puzzled. "I've never seen it before." They immediately began the process of tracing the call, hoping it would lead us somewhere. This number was the first solid lead we had, and it had to mean something. The anticipation was almost unbearable as I waited. With the police's assistance, I searched through his contacts, unable to find a match. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the saved numbers, seeking any unfamiliar ones. Each name and number looked frustratingly ordinary. "Nothing here seems out of place," I muttered to the officer, feeling a mix of frustration and dread. The police took note, but it seemed like another dead end. Why was this number such a mystery? They tracked the call and learned it was registered to an unknown individual. When the officer delivered this news, a cold shiver trickled down my spine. "Do you recognize this name?" he asked, showing me a printout. I shook my head, more puzzled than before. "No, I've never heard of this person," I replied. The officer's expression turned serious. "This could be our first real lead," he said, trying to give me a sliver of hope. I felt a chill run down my spine as I pondered who this person could be. What connection could they have with my husband? The more I thought about it, the more unsettling it became. Was this stranger responsible for his disappearance? The possibilities were endless and terrifying. I wanted answers, needed to know the truth. "Whoever they are, we will find them," the officer assured me. But I couldn't shake off the unease. The police continued their search while I tried to remain hopeful. Days blended together in a haze of anxiety and waiting. Every ring of the phone made my heart skip a beat, hoping it was news. Any news. "We're doing everything we can," an officer would say, trying to reassure me. But the absence of answers was gnawing at my insides. In those moments, hope felt like a fragile thread, ready to snap. Determined to find answers, I set out to investigate on my own, visiting all the places we went before the disappearance. Retracing our steps seemed like the only way to make sense of it all. I revisited restaurants, parks, and even the small shops we had wandered into. "Have you seen this man?" I would ask, showing his photo. Most people shook their heads, but I held on to hope that someone had seen something. Hotel security cameras showed my husband meeting someone in the lobby. The footage brought new twists to the mystery. The timestamp was right before he vanished. My heart raced as I watched the grainy images. "Who is that?" I asked the security officer, pointing at the shadowy figure next to my husband. "We're not sure yet," he said, "but we're enhancing the footage." This was a breakthrough, even if a small one. The footage was grainy, but it was clear he was agitated during the conversation. My husband's normally calm demeanor was replaced by animated hand gestures and tense body language. "He looks upset," I said, my voice trembling. The other person appeared to respond calmly, which only seemed to frustrate my husband more. "We need to find out who that is," the officer said. This new lead could possibly unravel everything. A staff member remembered seeing them and said the other person seemed familiar. "I've seen that guy before," she said, peering closely at the screen. My heart jumped. "Where?" I asked eagerly. She squinted, trying to recall. "I think he's been here a couple of times, usually at the bar." The police officer jotted down her statement. At least now we had something. A regular face, someone who could be identified. The police continued to work on identifying the mystery individual. With the new lead, they pulled footage from the bar area and other common spaces. The hours spent analyzing every frame made me feel a mix of hope and urgency. "This is taking too long," I murmured, pacing the room. "These things take time," the officer responded. The identification process was arduous, but vital to the investigation's progress. I felt a mix of fear and determination as I tried to help. Although each day was filled with dread, the glimpses of progress fueled my resolve. I gathered any scrap of information, every casual conversation, and passed it to the police. "We'll find him," I repeated to myself like a mantra. My focus shifted from the fear of losing him to the determination of bringing him back. Failure wasn't an option. Days went by and the uncertainty was unbearable. Each day felt like an endless loop of anxiety and despair. The police worked tirelessly, but updates were scarce. I could hardly eat or sleep, my mind constantly dwelling on the unknown. Friends and family called to offer support, but nothing could ease the growing void inside me. The longer my husband was missing, the more torturous each passing minute became. I began receiving strange calls and text messages, all with cryptic hints and veiled threats. My phone would buzz at odd hours, displaying unknown numbers and unsettling content. "Stop looking," one message read. Another said, "You don't know what you're getting into." Each one felt like a punch to the gut, shaking me to my core. I wasn't sure who was behind them, but it made the situation even more alarming. Reporting it to the police, they assured me they were monitoring the situation. "We're tracking these numbers," Detective Collins said, his voice calm but focused. "Stay alert and keep us updated on any new contact." I handed over my phone so they could analyze the messages and calls. Their commitment offered a small comfort, but the constant barrage of threatening messages kept my nerves on edge, leaving me unsettled. I stayed vigilant, knowing these messages could provide a lead. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart raced. I had a notepad ready to jot down any details or patterns that could be useful. Every strange number, each cryptic word, could be a puzzle piece. "We can't let our guard down," I reminded myself. The police and I stayed on high alert, hoping to catch a break in this twisted game. The police managed to trace one call to a nearby apartment. Detective Collins informed me of the breakthrough with a determined expression. "This could be our first big lead," he said. The team mobilized quickly, preparing to investigate. I watched them leave with a mix of hope and dread, praying that this lead would finally unravel the mystery. Each step they took felt like a step closer to finding my husband. Officers went to the location, but the person had fled just before their arrival. It was a frustrating, gut-wrenching setback. "They must have been tipped off," the officer speculated, shaking his head. The apartment was empty, no signs of struggle or clues left behind. They canvassed the area, asking neighbors if they had seen anything unusual. The disappointment was palpable, yet the urgency to find my husband only intensified. The investigation deepened, bringing up past ties and unsettling connections. With every stone unturned, fragments of my husband's history emerged, leading to more questions. The police dug into his background, exploring relationships and old ties. "We need to explore every angle," Detective Collins emphasized. The more they uncovered, the more the web of mystery expanded. Each new discovery brought us closer to understanding, but the answers remained frustratingly out of reach. The unknown number was linked to an old friend from my husband's college days. When Detective Collins revealed the name, my mind raced back to stories my husband had shared. "Does this name ring a bell?" he asked. I nodded, recalling some details. This friend was someone I had heard of but never met. The police saw this as a key lead. "We need to speak with him immediately," Collins insisted. When confronted, the friend denied any recent contact, but his alibi seemed weak. Detective Collins was firm. "Where were you the night your friend disappeared?" The friend's answers were vague and unconvincing. "We've just been out of touch," he stammered. His nervousness only fueled our suspicions. "We need to verify his story," Collins said, instructing the officers to check his movements. It was another thread to pull on, hoping it led somewhere. Fingers were pointing in every direction, but no concrete evidence emerged. The police interviewed friends, colleagues, and any known acquaintances. Rumors and speculations ran wild, yet no solid leads materialized. "It's like chasing ghosts," an officer commented wearily. Despite the intensive search and numerous interrogations, nothing brought us closer to the truth. Each day felt like a maze with no exit, and the weight of the unknown grew heavier. Meanwhile, I felt every second ticking by, heightening my fear. As the minutes passed, each small sound made me jump, my nerves on edge. The tension was unbearable, like a weight pressing down on my chest. The silence of the empty house was oppressive. Every tick of the clock felt like an eternity, making the uncertainty even more grueling. The longer it took, the more frantic I became. The investigation felt like it was hitting dead ends. Each lead turned into a frustrating loop of unanswered questions. "We need fresh eyes on this," one officer sighed. The detectives seemed as worn out as I was, their expressions a mix of determination and exhaustion. Despite their best efforts, Nothing seemed to bring us closer to finding my husband. The feeling of hopelessness began to creep in, shadowing every glimmer of hope. One evening, while reviewing old photos, I noticed a recurring symbol on my husband's belongings. It was subtle, almost like a hidden watermark on various items. "What's this?" I murmured, squinting to get a better look. I pulled out more photos, concentrating on the details. There it was again, a strange, intricate symbol, appearing on books, a keychain, even on a cufflink. This unexpected find made my pulse quicken. It was worth investigating. Detectives identified it as connected to a covert network. "This symbol is linked to some shady operations," one of them explained. My mind buzzed with question. "What kind of network?" I asked, anxiety creeping into my voice. The detective's serious expression did little to calm my nerves. "It's used by a group involved in various illegal activities," he added. This revelation brought a new, more alarming layer to the mystery. This revelation turned the investigation on its head. The police shifted their focus, diving deeper into this covert network's operations. "We need to understand their motives," Detective Collins emphasized. "If they're involved, it changes everything." This new angle meant reevaluating all previous assumptions. My mind was racing, trying to piece together how my husband could be tied to such a dangerous group. The stakes had never felt higher. Every aspect of our life was under scrutiny. Our friends and family questioned. The detectives dug into our history, asking about past disputes, financial issues, even our social circles. "Did he ever mention anything unusual?" they asked repeatedly. Each question felt invasive but necessary. Family gatherings, casual hangouts, all were now potential sources of crucial information. The relentless questioning was exhausting, but I understood it was essential for finding my husband. The network's ties to various crimes forced the police to reconsider the motive behind my husband's disappearance. "This isn't just a missing person case anymore," Detective Collins said sternly. The network's involvement opened doors to potential motives like retribution or coercion. "We have to dig deeper into this group's activities," he continued. The detectives' renewed vigor brought a sense of urgency, knowing the clock was ticking even faster now. The pressure on the investigation increased. Policemen worked around the clock, poring over documents and interviewing anyone linked to the covert network. "We're running against time," one officer remarked. I felt like we were racing it against an invisible deadline, each moment growing more fraught with tension. The burden of finding my husband weighed on everyone involved. Each piece of information gathered was another step closer to the truth. Or so we hoped. I felt compelled to delve deeper, revisiting my husband's office and searching for anything that might help. The sterile, organized space now felt ominous. Where do I even start? I wondered aloud. I rifled through drawers, scanned bookshelves, and reviewed files. Each paper, each object, was scrutinized for hidden meanings. This wasn't just about finding clues anymore. It was about unraveling another layer of my husband's life. I found hidden documents outlining confidential projects. "What are these?" I muttered, flipping through the pages filled with coded language and complex diagrams. They seemed related to high-stakes business dealings. This could be significant, I thought. Gathering the documents, I rushed to share them with the police. Detective Collins took one look and nodded. "We'll have our specialists analyze these. This could be the breakthrough we need to understand his situation." Sharing this with the police, it turned their focus to his work environment. Immediately, they reviewed security footage from his office and questioned his coworkers. I handed them access to his work email and calendar. "This might hold the key," Detective Collins suggested. I felt a tiny glimmer of hope. Perhaps this would provide the breakthrough we so desperately needed. The scrutiny intensified as they began piecing the puzzle together. His colleagues were interrogated. One by one, they were called into the station. "Did he mention any threats or act differently?" the officers asked. Most of them seemed genuinely shocked, recounting how dedicated and focused he was. Some mentioned late nights and early morning calls. "He was always a hard worker, but recently he seemed more stressed," one colleague noted. Each interview added more layers to the growing complexity of the case. Unveiling these documents made me question if I truly knew him. There were projects I'd never heard of, meetings with people I couldn't recognize. Who was my husband working with? I wondered. Each revelation chipped away at my certainty about his life. Were there other secrets he had kept from me? The doubts gnawed at me, adding another layer of distress to the already unbearable situation. This added pressure on law enforcement to act swiftly. With each new finding, the stakes seemed to rise. "We need to move quickly before any potential leads go cold," Detective Collins urged his team. The atmosphere was charged with urgency. Officers worked round the clock, chasing down every clue and re-evaluating past evidence. The race against time was becoming more critical with every passing moment. With information overload, I decided to reanalyze everything from the start, hoping overlooked details might emerge. I spread out all the notes, photos, and documents across the living room floor. "We must have missed something," I whispered to myself, trying to piece everything together again. Hours went by as I reviewed every event and conversation. The urge to find some hidden clue grew stronger with each passing minute. My husband's behavior, the meeting in the lobby, cryptic messages, all hinted at a significant backstory. Each element formed a complex web that seemed almost impossible to untangle. What was he involved in? I wondered aloud. Every detail felt like it pointed to something larger. The mystery of his preoccupation and secrecy grew deeper as I delved back into the timeline of events leading up to his disappearance. The police, now with a clearer direction, started connecting the dots to a potential financial dispute. "We're looking at key financial documents now," Detective Collins informed me. I felt a mix of panic and relief, hoping this would finally yield answers. The financial ties suggested a motive that made sense in the chaos. Each piece of evidence seemed like a step closer to solving the puzzle. This became the lead motive. "It appears financial concerns were a significant factor," Detective Collins stated. It was alarming to think money could be the root cause of such a dire situation. The theory aligned with his recent stress and the shadowy contacts. Piecing together bank statements, transaction histories, and confidential deals painted a picture of risk and tension. Finally, a motive seemed within reach, fueling the police's efforts. Encouraged, I continued to stay in touch with the detective in charge. Detective Collins provided regular updates, keeping me involved in every step. "We're following several strong leads now," he reassured me. Each call felt like holding my breath. Balancing between hope and fear, the constant communication offered some solace amidst the chaos. The investigation gained momentum, but the uncertainty still loomed over every interaction. The police worked tirelessly to gather more evidence. "Every piece counts," Detective Collins said, emphasizing their collective effort. They conducted more field work, gathered testimonies, and analyzed digital footprints. The complexity of the case demanded relentless dedication. Files piled up, maps were marked with potential leads. The depth of their investigation was as impressive as it was daunting. The hope was that these efforts would soon lead to my husband. It was the detectives' persistence that finally paid off. Tirelessly, they had combed through every piece of evidence, chasing leads that seemed to go nowhere. But they didn't give up. One evening, Detective Collins called with a breakthrough. "We've uncovered something crucial," he said, a tone of urgency in his voice. I felt my pulse quicken, knowing we were finally getting somewhere. This was the moment we'd been working towards. They discovered my husband had been working undercover to expose his employer's illegal activities. It was a bombshell revelation that no one saw coming, least of all me. He was risking everything to bring down a criminal organization, Detective Collins explained. The enormity of it hit me like a ton of bricks. My husband was not just a missing person, but a key player in a dangerous game. This changed everything. The call he made before vanishing was his last report. "This is the last thing he did before he disappeared," Detective Collins stated, pointing to the call log. The number dialed was linked to his undercover work. Every part of me was desperate to understand the significance of that call. What did he uncover? I wondered aloud. The urgency to decode this final piece of communication was palpable. His car wasn't empty. It contained meticulously gathered evidence crucial for cracking the case wide open. "These documents and recordings are a goldmine," the detective said, holding up a thick dossier. Detectives pored over the contents, eyes wide with realization. "This is what he was working on," they murmured. Each page, each file was another step toward uncovering the truth about his employer's dark dealings. The police had to act quickly to use this evidence to their advantage. "We can't afford to wait," said Detective Collins, his face set with determination. Teams were deployed to follow up on leads and corroborate the data. Every second counted. The intensity in the room grew palpable as officers rushed to piece together the puzzle. The weight of urgency loomed over every decision made and every step taken. Efforts intensified to locate my husband before it was too late. The newfound evidence injected fresh adrenaline into the investigation. Officers ramped up their search, canvassing neighborhoods, revisiting suspects, and scrutinizing his employer's records. "We're closer than ever," Detective Collins assured me, though I saw the strain in his eyes. As the days grew longer, the race against time seemed more critical, each hour feeling heavier than the last. Time was of the essence as the truth began to unravel. The gathered evidence started to paint a clearer picture of the events leading to his disappearance. Conversations intercepted, documents translated. The puzzle pieces were locking into place. "We need to act on this now," Collins urged his team. Hope began to overshadow the dread that had taken residence in my heart. We were closing in on the real story. I braced myself for what lay ahead, hoping we were closer to finding him. The detective's reports and the mounting evidence provided a sliver of hope amidst the chaos. "Stay strong," friends and family advised, their words both comforting and essential. Each piece of new information brought us nearer to the truth, yet the future remained uncertain. All I could do was prepare myself for the next step in this harrowing journey. The coordinated effort was now in full swing. Multiple agencies collaborated, pooling resources to exploit the evidence. "This operation is gaining momentum," Collins said during one of his briefings. Officers worked seamlessly, connecting dots faster and more efficiently. The combined effort was a testament to their dedication. The once scattered pieces of the puzzle were aligning, guiding us steadily toward the truth about my husband's disappearance. Our journey for truth and justice was far from over, but the end seemed in sight. The tireless investigation, sleepless nights, and relentless pursuit of leads were finally paying off. "We're getting closer," Collins reaffirmed, his confidence infectious. The haze of confusion started to lift, revealing the path to answers we desperately sought. Though many challenges remained, this newfound clarity brought a glimmer of hope that we would soon find my husband.